We'll officially kick off the LawFi DAO community call for the 7th of October. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which we all meet. I join you from Wurundjeri land today, and I'm glad to be home after quite some travel. And I'd also like to extend our respect to elders past, present and emerging. The LawFi DAO culture and our values and belief is intended to be respect, reciprocity, integrity and kindness, while doing things differently and appreciating that time is our most precious resource. We have a short agenda today, so I'll open it for community discussion, any issues that you're seeing or that you'd like to raise as part of this forum. For us, over the past week, the early engagement request to ASIC has come back with a few further items to respond, key of which was whether the membership token would accrue or not in value, because that's a critical gateway as to whether ASIC would be involved as a member or even as an observer. So just making my way through responding to that request and trying to arrange a meeting. It looks like any sort of preliminary feedback, though, on Section 115 of the Corporations Act won't come to pass in the next week. So the question is, if we don't have all of the information available for the general meeting and to make a proper decision, not that ASIC will give advice, but to at least have gone through that process, do the members that have RSVP'd to attend and vote on particularly whether they approve the white paper or not next week, will they feel comfortable that they have all of the information to do so? So I'll just pause there and see if you'd like to suggest anything now or in the chat with initial reactions on timing of general meetings / all of those things.
Joni, I think it's one of those things where it's part of the exploration, really. So yes, it's a risk assessment, but a risk assessment's going to be there for everybody anyway. So I think the way to approach it is to consider it as a timestamp of consideration. So we deal with what we know at the time. We document what we know at the time and document why we've made the decisions we have at the time. And if they have to change later, they change later when there's more information available. But it sets a tone and it develops a concept of line of sight, so we can demonstrate where we're at, what we've done, what decisions have been made and why they've been made. And I think that's all any regulators can ask down the track, that things have been duly considered. So that's my view.
Yeah, and on that front, we had something like 25 paid up members, and it's looking like we will have at least 5 people that have, taken one for the team, so to speak, and said, I'll withdraw my membership and, LawFi DAO will pay the refund. So that reduces the risk somewhat because, by approving it with less than 20 members, it doesn't fulfill one of the key criterion of the Section 115, but it does put us in a holding pattern then until we can complete or get enough of the way through the early engagement process, and perhaps with the support of some independent legal advice, as to when we reopen memberships formally and put some bounds around, what are the things that membership really does entitle you to versus being a non-member and part of the broader community, so to speak. Greg Metzbaker being one of them, and so thank you for doing that.
That's right. And you don't have to refund the money. We'll treat that as a donation to the cause.
So you're still fronting up your office, Greg, for the AGM. That's
yeah. Sorry, I'm at home. We got renovations. I'm at home today, and I'm stuck in a little cupboard-sized room. So that's why I didn't actually have the background on. I agree with Andrew. I think there's 2 things. This was always going to be messy, right? this is the first time anyone's tried this. So you're going to go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, make progress here, come back here. So I think that that it's not clean in the first version is part of the process, right? It's part of the learning process. So we may find we set it all up and we have to unwind the whole thing and start again. But we'll take our learnings and do it faster, better, quicker next time. I think the other thing is we could be talking 3 years from now about the design of this thing and how it might be and what's best. Sometimes you just got to get on with it. And I think there's probably been enough discussion. There's been a whole committee about establishment. Everyone seems reasonably comfortable. I think sometimes you just got to get on with it.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, the key difference between your founder and your entrepreneur and the lawyer, the conservative lawyer. So we have to take some middle ground at some point. So thank you. Greg, Oakford or Leah, did you have any comments to raise at this stage? Or we can...
No, I think I would agree with Andrew and Greg. I think at this point, I think it's best to just push on and go ahead with the AGM.
Yeah, great.
The lawyers take, the entrepreneur founder take, and now you get the DGen take, which is just mint and roll the dice.
It's important to have that take. Yes,
yeah.
That is the DAO community, in large part. All right, cool. So looking forward then to seeing those of you who can make the general meeting in person next week. Zero Cap have kindly offered their space in Melbourne, which is along St Kilda Road. For all those that have RSVP'd, there'll be a confirmation email, just making sure that you've got all the materials again, and there will be virtual access provided through the Zero Cap meeting room. You just have to make sure that you have registered through Eventbrite for the community building call on the 14th of October. That's the registration link that we're using. So again, I will send some reminder emails to make sure that everybody knows where they need to be or how to access that meeting so that they can participate. I've already had a few note though that they won't be able to make it, so they're in the process of filling out their proxy forms. So I think that we should have quorum, but I'll let everybody know if it's looking like we won't, to pass those special resolutions. I didn't have anything else on establishment, unless, other than to say on the agenda for the establishment subcommittee meeting today is insurance. Talking through, as you raised, Andrew, last week, the key risks, whether the LawFi DAO is insurable and what are the key risks that may cause an insurer or stack of them to balk. So we'll go through in that in a lot more detail in the subcommittee today.
Right.
And sorry, I also did want to mention for Greg M, noting that there's 2 Gregs on the call today, the Greg M, your feedback on, just simple steps from a startup's perspective on how to establish a DAO, some guides. The materials that you sent through were great and I love them. I just haven't had a chance to further flesh them out. But would you be comfortable for me to even put that in the Discord and start getting some discussion around those? Yeah,
go for it. There's no problem with that at all.
Yeah, great. Okay, we'll do that. Finally, forgive me, it's all coming back to me now. I'm actually waking up. But the discussion last week around posting a notice about the official assets in our Treasury, the website has also now been updated, again, to try and provide a bit of a model, best practice model for other DAOs and their front ends. We had some scam airdrop tokens sent to the Treasury wallet, and the feedback was, instead of giving any more airtime to scam tokens, instead on the website just say what the official tokens are, and give very clear warnings that any other tokens are not official, not endorsed, scam, be wary, could have malicious links.
That didn't take long.
No. Yeah, and the LawFi DAO wallet address, I've been quite careful not to just have it open and available on the website. You have to click through the membership form to get to it. But still, somebody's gotten wind of it, or it's been picked up in some search array to get the first batch of scam tokens. So you just can't get around it, unfortunately.
There's probably a bot somewhere, Joni, and it's the state of how things are.
Yeah, and the other piece of feedback was that we can send those tokens to a burn address. I'm still, even myself.
Don't touch them, because they might drain. They might drain. Got in there. It'll be a bait and switch. Just I wouldn't touch them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we're definitely not touching them for the next little while until maybe we get an expert to look at what might be the consequences. Because the accountant, I've also trained an accountant. I hate things not balancing that should be in there and that shouldn't be in there and that are. So it is on the backlog list.
Well, you can account for them and then write them off. Write them down. So
yeah.
But I think that's a positive, right? We're obviously important enough to be recognised that we're worth scamming.
That's true. That's true. There's silver lining there. But there's some really interesting work being done by Vic Wells, who's the chair of the Pay to Rely Committee. She had been sending out all of the requests for early engagement with the various legal services oversight bodies, which are state and territory based, and there's sort of a national council that convenes them. We've now had initial meetings with the New South Wales body and the Victorian body, who have each given very helpful feedback. If she was on the call, I think she's travelling at the moment and sends her apologies. But really good quality feedback about having a costs agreement, which is the required sort of engagement letter when you're providing legal services, be delivered in a form similar to how the Can't Be Evil licenses have been stored on Arweave, and smart contracts can map to Can't Be Evil license 1. You know, we can have pay to rely product cost agreement type 1, type 2, so that we get to some standardization around just clearly engaging and more automatically engaging through the pay to rely products. Equally, that if the services are less than $650 and bar government entities and one other type, no cost agreement is actually required. So you could have a more simple form of these pay to rely products where the qualified lawyer contributor, if they set the price below that, then they access a simplified regime, so to speak. So those sort of practical tips that are really coming through are helpful in the design, and the next steps are to give a plain text version of what those various initial cost agreements might look like. They're all very positive about the pay to rely model, what it could do, not just for Web3 legal and tax issues, but access to justice generally. We've said we'll remain tight to our focus, and establishment is obviously our core focus at the moment. But it's really nice to receive the positive sentiment from the legal oversight bodies that this could be helpful for better and efficient delivery of legal services. The other thing that's come up is the distinction between legal information versus legal services, which is sort of like in the financial services industry, the provision of general information versus legal advice or financial advice. So again, some guidance to any LawFi DAO core contributors to the pay to rely products will have to ensue to make sure people understand or are helped to navigate that difference. So there's a big national council meeting later in October, and there's also a collation of materials to assist some of those law bodies to talk to the pay to rely model at that council meeting and receive the national level feedback. And then finally, on the community building, again, as membership is closed, it's just raising awareness of LawFi DAO and generating a wait list, so to speak. And VIC has certainly been on the Asian token conference circuit, Token 2049. I think there was an Asian FinTech festival that's just been or that's coming up, and there's a Singapore FinTech festival. So there's been lots of opportunities to discuss in the Asian region about LawFi DAO, which is again generating some interest. I've just come back from Europe and been talking about LawFi DAO with some of the other global and national focused responsible blockchain advocacy bodies. So the network is certainly growing, and I'm really calmed that it was worrying me that we were going so slow for a startup, but I know that we have to. But I think that the momentum is building nonetheless. And the taxation of token activities working group has now concluded. The Board of Tax submission was made earlier this week, setting out at a high level, but it still spans 30 pages, the tax issues in relation to DAOs, mostly from an Australian tax perspective, but leaning into international tax principles. There is a big meeting with the Board of Tax and Treasury today. So following that, after I've had the opportunity to discuss the submission, it will be shared on socials, and particularly with the members of and the community of LawFi DAO. It was a submission made through BADASL, but at the right forum, we'll raise it with the view of the LawFi DAO members further discussing it and ratifying all or parts of it to the extent that they support some of the issues and policy recommendations made. It was a very hard piece to write, and it follows the piece written last week about Bitcoin as a foreign currency and the Australian Treasury's attempt or provision of exposure draft legislation to close that opportunity to treat Bitcoin as a foreign currency for tax purposes. So both of those submissions have really, across them, is a holistic statement now of that where we are and where we really want to decide we want to go. So both Treasury and the Board of Tax have that written information now. Let's see what they do with it. Then the UK digital assets consultation paper, Iris is unwell, so that group will be postponed today and we'll pick up again next week. But we're pretty much almost through all of the 18 or so chapters, and we'll also be looking to finalise that submission next week. I did have a call at midnight last night. The UK Law Commission are consulting with DAO legal advisors around the world in relation to their DAO scoping study. LawFi DAO, as you know, had expressed interest in participating in that scoping study. And the initial discussion was around feedback on a draft call for evidence paper that the Law Commission has prepared. It's likely it won't be released to the public until about November. But we're trying our best, myself and all of the other people on the advisory panel, to give the feedback to the Law Commission so that the right questions are being asked. We may have an idea of how the questions might be answered, but it's really important to get a good set of questions out to the community. The common theme coming out is nobody knows how to define a DAO. Nobody. It's the hardest exercise because they've sort of developed, if you start with Bitcoin, the chronology and the emergence means that they've changed over the life. And now if you have a very broad interpretation of DAO, it could include any type of organization. And that's where you get this spectrum sense coming in of, okay, we've started all human, but there's an aspiration to be decentralized and autonomous. But is it okay to call that type of thing a DAO? Or is it a company or an association of persons that is on a path to progressive decentralization? And only at a certain point can they be called a DAO, which is more along the lines of what the purest DAOs are, that the operations have been protocolized.
Joni, this is a really interesting point, and as you know, Multilateral Group has been talking to the UK Law Commission back in putting the submission together to get the funding in the first place. And Sarah reached out to us, Sarah Green, the Commissioner, a month or so ago, and wants to set up a meeting this month with Multilateral Group to put our industry perspective on this. And we're talking about building on our DAO schools of thought, which we've talked about before, but effectively looking at providing breadth of definitions so DAOs can be thought more as digital organisations that meet certain standards that have got different applications in different circumstances that do create the opportunity for AI-driven DAOs, the humans in the loop, all those pieces, but also look at some of the core components that aren't necessarily centralised from a regulator's point of view, things like governance, risk, quality management systems. Those sorts of pieces are the bits that are missing in the broad thinking of how DAOs are evolving at the moment, and we've got some very clear views on that, and that we've shared with Sarah previously, and we'll be exploring that in this round. And it comes to why we've set up our Wayfinder program around looking at digital design of organisations, because what I find fascinating with LawFi DAO is the passion that comes with it and the amount of people and the high quality of people who are involved in it. But it still has a perspectival issue that is shared with your Joe Blow nerdism DAO. It doesn't work through those pieces of unknown. And that's what we've been looking to design, is how to look at least making the unknown known so you can then figure out what the hell you're going to do about it. So that's the process we're working through, and we'll be sharing that also with the Law Commission from our perspective as well, to give them more breadth in terms of what sort of flexibility there is possible, because the reality is none of us know. It's nascent. Fundamentally, it must be like sitting there figuring out what corporate law was going to be like hundreds of years ago. And that's the space we find ourselves in right now. So, yep.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the key questions that's going to be asked up front. What are the uses for DAOs, and do you think they will survive to be the new type of global organizational structure? Is that the paradigm that they're introducing? None of us could give a clear answer on the call. Like we had maybe separate answers, but there still wasn't quite consensus. But Andrew, have you had any occasion to compare the Koala DAO model law with your schools of thought?
No, I did the initial analysis on it and broke down the core pieces, and the pieces we're working through at the moment are looking at what are the frameworks that we set up for regulatory equivalence. Yep. What are the frameworks we set up for functional equivalence from an operating point? So to that point that Kelsey made the other week about there are no operating systems here. Well, actually there are, and they're all in old school design technology of 30 years ago. It's just a matter of how do you bring them in, and how do you add the technology, and what technology makes possible to bring that forward. So we're working through all that exactly right now, along with an attribution and allocation system that starts to look at how do we use algorithms to identify people's rights and obligations and their entitlements and things like that. So that's all work that we're evolving.
Yeah, and Primavera Di Filippi, who was one of the key authors of the Koala DAO model law, she actually is going to be out in Australia in November and December. That there's a big symposium being organised by RMIT to say, from an Australian legal perspective, how could we incorporate this? What are the issues in recognising this in Australian law to give DAOs an invitation to register as a DAO, or at least have legal recognition as a separate thing with legal liability, at least from an Australian perspective. So a lot of that discussion will flesh out at that time. So I'll try and pin down the date and share the details with everybody, all the LawFi DAO members anyway. So that's all the update for this week, unless there's further issues going on in your minds that you'd like to raise in this forum. Otherwise, we can hold anything over to next week.
Oh, good. So is there a meeting next week, given it's the same day as the AGM?
There is a community call in the morning.
Yep.
But I think that unless anything comes out, or we wish to continue the focused insurance discussion or move on to another item, we don't have to have the establishment meeting next week, Andrew. Up to you, because it's typically you and Miles, so I might take that offline with both of you.
Yeah, we can figure that out or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm going to attend in person at the AGM. So
Yay. Yes,
yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you for making the time, and see you next in the establishment, or otherwise next week, in person or virtual.
Yeah.
Thanks. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye all.